Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first Shark Week Hangout with Sharks4Kids. My name is Joe Grabowski. I'll be your host for today. As you can see, I'm going to be a talking Sharks4Kids logo because for whatever reason, my webcam won't read today. So, yeah, but at least you can hear me. So, for those who don't know, Sharks4Kids is all about bringing ocean conservation and shark conservation in the classrooms all over North America. You can check out our website, sharks4kids.com, where you'll find all kinds of amazing interviews with experts, videos, curriculum, posters, all kinds of things that you can use in your classroom. So, as I said, we're hosting a Shark Week this week. We have 2 hangouts a day to Thursday with amazing females in the field of sharks. It's a great pleasure to kick things off today with Andrea Marshall. Andrea is one of the world's leading manta ray experts, first person to get her PhD in mantas, in fact. She is a co-founder of an amazing organization called the Marine Megafauna Foundation, based out of Mozambique, and she's also a National Geographic Explorer. She's also an amazing supporter of getting education into classrooms and sharing. So Andrea, it's an absolute pleasure to have you kicking off our Shark Week this week.
Yes, how fun and what a privilege. Thanks so much, Joe. Super excited to talk to you guys about my work today. So I'm just going to share my screen and we'll get started. So my talk today, as Joe just said, will be focusing on manta rays because that's my area of specialty. I am a shark and ray specialist, but I tend to focus a lot of my work on mantas. So today I want to talk to you about how we're, at our foundation, we're saving some of these ocean giants from extinction, particularly the giant manta rays. So our foundation was created to try and help some of these really large iconic species like whale sharks and turtles and dugongs and manta rays from extinction. Many of you may know that the oceans are full of threats these days, and these animals tend to be some of the first animals affected in different ecosystems around the world. And so we're fighting really hard to try and protect some of these incredible animals for the future. And so that's what our foundation focuses on. Our 2 biggest programs are on whale sharks and manta rays, and I lead up the manta ray program. This program has been running for the last 15 years, and I've been doing research on manta rays all across the globe in just numerous different continents and different countries around the world. So as a manta ray biologist and someone who really loves rays, it's my duty to try and bear witness to the issues that I see facing these animals. This group is an incredible group of animals. The sharks tend to get a lot of the focus, and that's why I'm so excited that Joe invited me to talk today during Shark Week about rays. Rays are essentially just flattened sharks. They're kind of like the cousin group of the sharks, but they tend to get a lot less attention. Having said that, they're a really incredible group of animals. There are actually more ray species in the world than sharks, and there actually are more species of rays that are threatened with extinction than sharks. So the ray group is actually in more trouble, and that really is, you know, a troubling fact for me, and something that I'm working very hard to try and combat. That group is really fascinating. They come in all different types of shapes and sizes and colors, just as you can see in front of you on this slide. Some of them have the most incredible features. You know, the sawfish have giant saws on the front of their face. The one at the bottom left is a torpedo ray. Torpedo rays can actually electrocute you. So they come in all kinds of shapes and sizes and colors. They penetrated into all different types of niches, different parts of the ocean. Really, really incredible group of fishes. Now the manta ray is the king of all of the rays. It's the world's largest ray. They can get up to about 22 feet across. That's from one. So these are really massive animals. It's really hard for me to express how big they are. So I like to throw in a photo of you know, a human swimming next to one, so you can just see how enormous these animals get. Just spectacular creatures. But you know, no need to fear necessarily. They're actually quite gentle animals. Like all of the ray species, if you look from the or actually all of the shark and ray species, if you look from the inside out, wait, sorry, this slide isn't working, but if you look from the inside out, you'll notice that all of their internal skeleton is made up of cartilage, which is the same stuff as in your ear or in the tip of your nose. And so, you know, these animals are really flexy and very buoyant. One of the things about rays that maybe this is one of the reasons that people aren't as afraid of rays as they are of sharks is they tend to have smaller, different teeth than sharks. They don't have really big razor type teeth like the sharks do. Manta rays do have teeth. They exist in what's called a tooth band only on the lower jaw. So if you look head down on a manta like we're looking right now, and you blow up that bottom lip with some high level photography, what you'll see is tiny little embedded teeth on the bottom jaw. So that photo on the inset on the right is just a single manta ray tooth, but they're so tiny. Mantas can have like 4,000 different teeth, but each one of them is only, you know, a couple millimeters in size. They're very, very small little teeth. So nothing to be worried about. My mom is really grateful for the fact that they can't chomp me or bite me. They're actually very gentle animals. Now, a lot of people think of rays and they immediately think of stingrays. There are a lot of species of stingrays in the ocean, like this one swimming along with this diver, but they're not even necessarily that dangerous. But manta rays don't have a stinging spine like the stingrays. You can see the stinging spine on this large stingray here, but manta rays don't actually have a sting at all, and so they can't even sting anyone. So I think my point here is that they don't have any teeth really to speak of. You know, I mean, they're just so small, they can't really do anything. They don't have a stinging spine, so these animals are actually incredibly gentle, and you mustn't ever fear, even if they're very large, there's nothing to fear with these animals. One of the things that makes them extraordinarily different is the fact that they swim their whole lives without stopping. You know, a lot of the ray species rest at the seabed. They, you know, kind of spend a lot of the day in the sand. But manta rays never stop swimming. They're constantly moving through the ocean. They live in blue open ocean environments. We call it a pelagic animal, and they spend their whole life swimming, and that can be maybe 40 to 50 years. So this is an incredible thing to have an animal that never stops, is in constant motion. These are incredibly powerful swimmers. And in actual fact, people have said that these are one of the most hydrodynamically efficient animals in the ocean, meaning that they're the most well-designed animal probably of most of the fish in the ocean. The only thing that limits their ability to be such good swimmers is sometimes these large fish that you see sticking onto them. So this individual here, you can see, has, I don't know, maybe a half a dozen fish kind of stuck all over it. These fish are called remora, and they have a modified sort of fin that allows them to suction cup onto the mantas. And that kind of doesn't seem like that big of a deal, and it wouldn't if there was only one fish. But sometimes these mantas can have you know, dozens and dozens, up to 50 or 60 of these fish all over their body. And that creates incredible drag, and obviously makes them less efficient swimmers. But other than that, these are really efficient swimmers. They're able to travel really long distances. We're just learning more about what they do in the open ocean. You know, we don't have access to these animals when they're swimming around the ocean. As you can imagine, unless they're inshore and in shallow water, we don't really get to see what they do. So in order to combat this, my team and I have been putting on these satellite tags, and you can see on the back of this animal a tiny little sort of tag sticking up. That's called a satellite tag. We place those on the animals. They stay on for maybe 6 months to a year, and it collects information about the mantas. So wherever they go, wherever they travel, no matter how far out to sea, no matter how deep, it collects data, and eventually it pops to the surface and then transmits that data back to our computers. So with this technology, we've been able to learn a lot about mantas, what they do, what they get up to. We now know that they travel, you know, thousands of miles in the ocean, along continental coastlines, offshore, out to sea. They travel in between different international countries, and they also dive incredibly deep into the oceans, up to 4,000 feet from the surface. So we're learning all kinds of incredible things about these mantas, and most of what we're learning tells us that they're incredible athletes. So they're not just a typical ray that kind of hangs out on a reef its whole life and doesn't go very, very far. These are, you know, ocean wanderers. These are explorers. So these are one of the greatest sort of migratory rays that there are, and they're just incredible animals that, you know, more we learn, you know, the more excited I get about, you know, these new discoveries that we're making. Most of their movements, most of what's actually provoking them to travel these long distances is trying to look for food. So manta rays feed on, even though they're some of the biggest animals in the ocean, they feed on some of the smallest animals. So they feed on zooplankton, which are tiny little little animals that float around in the water column. You can see this manta ray feeding on all of those little particles now. You know, blooms of these zooplankton animals don't occur everywhere, so the mantas have to hunt out these blooms of zooplankton. So they travel from country to country, from area to area, looking for, you know, these areas of productivity, these areas of food that they can snack on. They are incredibly large mouths. As you can see, this one here opening its mouth, very large cavernous mouths. They're able to gulp 240 gallons of water a minute. So that's about as much as the average size hot tub going through their mouth every single minute. So they're able to push a lot of water through their gill slits. And what they're straining is all of these little food particles that you see in the water column. It can be little things like jellyfish or fish eggs or, you know, larval fish. It can be all kinds of little things floating around in the water column. So a lot of times we see fish eggs, we see little snails, and these are the things that mantas are ingesting, and they have to, you know, eat thousands and millions of them in order to make them full. So this is just a short little video showing how manta rays feed, and you can actually see them swimming with their mouths wide open. Manta rays are quite social animals, so they tend to feed in groups, almost cooperatively, you know, so they are all kind of feeding together in these chains, and you can just see them slowly moving through the water column with their mouths wide open, capturing all of that food as they travel along. And how it works really is you can see that in the upper right hand corner you can see the manta's mouth wide open. So as the water passes into the manta's mouth, all of those strange little black lines that you see inside the manta's mouth, those are actually like strainers. So the bottom photo is showing you the actual straining mechanism. It's almost like a sieve. We call it a gill raker or a branchial filament. But essentially what it is just like a little piece of sieve that's in the manta's mouth that actually, when the water passes through it, it collects all the little animals, and then the clean water passes out those gill slits that you see on the left-hand side. So that by intaking all of that water and then sieving it through this specialized gill raker, they're able to capture all of these little food particles, and they're able to eat. Now, most of the time we don't see mantas offshore or feeding. We see them inshore at reefs, cleaning quietly. And when I say cleaning, I mean manta rays come to these specific reefs every morning in order to have little fish species like this little butterfly fish that you can see underneath this manta here. They come and have fish species clean their body of different things, whether it's algal buildup or parasites. Maybe one has a shark bite, and these fish are attending to that shark bite to help it heal. Here's a short little video just to show you a manta ray with all of the different fish attending to it. This is a daily ritual for mantas, and this is the most common place that we can find them because we can predictably go to these reefs where the mantas come every morning to be cleaned. And thereby we can interact with them. So this is the best place for us to do research. You can see all those little fish just attending to that manta as it swims around in a circle. It's quite beautiful to see. It's really kind of an interesting behavior to see. And at these cleaning stations, I think one of the most interesting things for me is how the manta rays interact with humans. So even when they're being cleaned, if they see a diver underwater, they'll take the time to come out and investigate us. These are some of the most inquisitive animals in the world, I think, in terms of fish. They are not necessarily afraid. They are very curious, and they love to interact with humans. And so that's one of my favorite things about them. They come in very close to inspect. You can actually see, you know, this manta eyeballing me. They have really huge eyes. Vision is a very important sense for them. So they have these really large eyes, and whatever it is they're interested in, they come right up to it and they, you know, inspect it very carefully. Their eyes are so important to them that they actually have an interesting feature to protect them. Mantas don't have eyelids or things like we do. So in order to protect their eyes, they're able to suck them back into their head and kind of protect them with this little plate of cartilage that you can see there. So if you get too close to a manta like this photo, and I took this photo on purpose to show this, but you'll see the eyeball actually retract into the head, which is pretty cool. But manta rays, one of the reasons that we believe that they interact with humans and that they are so curious is that they are seemingly very intelligent animals. This is one of my favorite facts about mantas, but mantas have the largest brain of any marine fish. So of all of the sharks and all of the rays you're going to hear about this week, or you'll see on Shark Week, or you'll see on any type of documentary that you watch, of all of the species out there, sort of these manta rays have the largest brain of any of them, and any other sort of fish species in the ocean too. So very, very cool. So when you compare them to any of the other ones, they have the largest brain to body ratio by a landslide, which is super cool. And we believe that the reason that they have these large brains is because they're very social animals. So social, maybe not the same as like an elephant or a dolphin, but pretty high up there. And one of the ways that we can tell that they're so social is how they interact with one another and how they interact with us. So this is one of my researchers. This is a manta that just came out of the middle of nowhere, of the ocean. And the first thing it does is come up and just investigate, right? So it's not afraid. It puts its belly right up to the diver's face, moving slowly, and just wants to explore, wants to find out what these strange bubble-blowing fish are, and wants to see what it can do with us. Ultimately, this manta spent about 2 hours playing with us, and that's not uncommon to have manta rays play for several hours with researchers or divers underwater, which is why they're one of the most beloved animals, I think, in the ocean. The way that we study mantas is really with photography. So all of our researchers are armed with cameras. And so as we encounter mantas on a daily basis, we're taking photos of every single individual. And we do that because every single individual has a specific spot pattern on it. So you can see this individual spot pattern on its belly there. Every single manta has a different sort of pattern or collection of spots that makes it unique. No manta is the same. You can see here a bunch of different mantas all over the world. None of them have the same pattern. They have these patterns before they're born. They don't change over the course of their life. So essentially, it's their version of a fingerprint. I call it a belly print, but it's pretty much the same idea as a fingerprint. It makes that individual unique. So this is how we study populations. We take photos of every single individual, and then we're able to tell who's who in that population and monitor individuals over time. So it's probably very similar to what your principal does at school, right? He has a rap sheet on every single one of you guys. He knows what your allergies are, what you got on your last math test, what your grades were last year. He has a little file on you. And so he knows exactly what's going on. He or she knows exactly what's going on in the school with all of his kids. I have that same rap sheet for all of my manta rays. And I keep very close track of all of the individuals in the populations that we work on. And I'm able to do science as a result of that. I'm able to tell things like how often they reproduce, how large the populations are, if the populations are declining. So there are at least 2 different species of mantas out there, the giant manta, which is this one, and then the smaller cousin, the reef manta. We believe there's a 3rd species of manta, and I hope to be describing the species this year. And this one sort of lives in the Atlantic Ocean in the Caribbean. All of the species of mantas are vulnerable to extinction. So these are all threatened species, and they are really at risk of going extinct in the wild within the next 100 years. And so that's one of the reasons that we're so dedicated to trying to learn more about them so we can prevent this from happening, because it would just be a very sad world without manta rays in it. Now, there's a lot of problems that face manta. The biggest is fishing pressure. So whether people are killing them intentionally, and people do that, just like for shark fins, a lot of people kill manta rays for those gill rakers, those filtering plates where they filter their food. A lot of people kill mantas just for that one body part, which they sell in Asia. But sometimes they actually capture mantas by accident too, while they're trying to catch tuna, or they just swim into nets that we have in the ocean. But there are a lot of manta rays being caught by fishermen. But there's a lot of other threats too. And one of the new threats that we're exploring is pollution and things like plastics in our ocean, which is just getting worse and worse. This is a problem that's becoming a really big issue in the oceans these days. And because manta rays feed at the surface, on tiny little organisms, they're actually ingesting a lot of this plastic while they're trying to feed on their normal food. So this is a problem that we're actually trying to learn a little bit more about and figure out what we can do about. A lot of the world's populations of mantas have come under fire in the last 20 years. There's been a lot of really sad reports of things like my population in Mozambique has declined by 98% in the last 15 years that I've been there, mostly due to fishing pressure. But in the last 5 years, we've had some tremendous international victories. Manta rays are now protected on some of the world's largest conservation conventions, meaning that the globe is, all of the countries in the world are starting to understand and appreciate the value of these animals and why we need to protect them. And a lot of countries are now protecting manta rays nationally in their own countries. So there's a lot of hope for these animals now. I think a lot of people appreciate that they're a very loved animal, that they're worth a lot of money for tourism, and that they're just a very iconic species that deserves our protection and deserves our respect. So I think there's a ray of hope for the mantas, which is one of my catchphrases. I really do believe that we've studied enough about these animals in the last 20 years that we are well placed to protect them. I think that a lot of populations are getting the protection that they need, and a bright future for these animals. I hope that some of this information was exciting for you, but mostly I think one of the things that I enjoy about talking to kids is just allow you to dream big, and just remind you that anything is possible, and that it's very, very important to follow your dreams. So if, I know a lot of kids that contact me that say like, oh, I really, I'm interested in sharks, or I really want to be a marine biologist. Oh, but people are telling me I should be a lawyer or, do something practical. If you love anything, it doesn't really matter what you love. You can make a huge difference. And that passion can be a driver for you to make a difference in this world. So for me, mantas is my passion, and I really do feel like in the last 15 years that we've made a huge impact globally on the conservation of these animals, and hopefully, there's a brighter future for mantas now because of the work that we're doing. So I encourage all of you guys to study hard and follow your dreams, and hopefully you're able to accomplish something amazing in your lives as well. So if you want to follow my work, please do at Queen of Mantas. I have a pretty strong social presence online, and also Joe mentioned my foundation, the Marine Megafauna Foundation. If you're interested in sharks and turtles and a lot of the other animals that we work on, you can find a lot of information on our website, and please follow us on our social media sites as well. There's always fun information there, and we're always doing lots of talks and stuff with Joe. We have a lot of really young and interesting scientists that work with us. So yes, please follow along if you have the time. So thanks for your attention today. I'd love to answer any questions you guys have.
All right. Well, Andrea, thank you so much. I never get tired of seeing your pictures and watching some of your videos. It's like you said, if there's something you're passionate about, you should go after it, because if you work hard, you never know what can be possible, and there really is no limit. If you want something, you should go after it. So thank you again for that message, and thank you for sharing a little bit about mantas and what's happening to them.
Cool. Does anyone have any questions about mantas or anything else?
All right. So just there are classrooms who are watching online. So I just want to remind you that you can submit questions on the YouTube page that you're watching on. There's a little chat sidebar. So type in your questions there, and we'll get to some of them. But let's meet our first classroom. So our first classroom is Mrs. Zamora's grade 4 is joining us from San Antonio, Texas. And let me turn your microphone on.
What you got?
You're good to go.
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh, fabulous.
How long can a regular manta ray get to be?
Go ahead and stand up.
I think it was how old?
Wait, back up. Do you see? So she can see you. Tell her who you are.
Hi.
Connor.
Connor.
Hi, Connie.
How long can a manta ray get to be, like a regular one?
Like, what's the largest manta ray that has been recorded?
That's a good question. In the literature, like if you go back in the historical records, people have seen manta rays, they say up to sort of 24 feet, 25 feet. But I've never seen one that big in the wild before. I've seen ones that are about 21 feet. But nothing much bigger than that anymore. And that's probably because a lot of the biggest ones have been killed. But yeah, they still, in some places like Ecuador, they still get massive, still get definitely over 20 feet there.
Okay.
Right, go ahead with one more if you have one.
Yes, we do.
My name is Olivia White.
Louder, baby.
My name is Olivia White. How
old were you?
How old were you when you studied database?
How old were you when you first started?
Cool. Hi, Olivia. That's a great question. I was studying sharks and doing some stuff until I was about 22, and then I kind of switched to mantas, and then I never really went back. I mean, we do shark research as well, but I started really my project at about 22 years of age, and I've been doing it steadily since then. So yeah, I was quite young when I started.
All right, let's jump to our next classroom. We have Mrs. Birds, grade 5s, joining us from Belleville, Ontario. And your microphone should be on.
Hello.
Lots of feedback from that classroom. Let's try one more time turning the mic on, but maybe you might have to type your question if the feedback's that strong. So I'm going to turn it on again and try asking your question right away, and maybe that'll kill the feedback.
It's because there's two.
Can you hear us now?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead, Kylie.
Hi, my name's Kylie, and how long have you been researching manta rays?
Hi, Kylie. Basically for the last 15 years. So I started out in Mozambique, as Joe mentioned, and I did my PhD there. And then I expanded my projects globally, and I now work all over the world. So for the last sort of maybe 9 years, I've been working in about 3 different continents and maybe about 6 or 7 different countries in various parts of the world on different projects on mantas.
All right, go ahead with one more if you guys have one.
Yeah.
How old do you have to be to start researching these kind of animals?
That's a great question. You know, I mean, to formally, you know, study them as a scientist, obviously you have to go through the academic channels. You know, you go to school and then go to university, and then you can start kind of doing research in your last years of university. But I actually have a lot of people that come to volunteer for us that are much younger. You know, I've even had people as young as 16 years old come out even to Mozambique and volunteer with us and get involved in some of the research data collection that we're doing and get involved even in some paper writing. So, you know, it's as young as you want to be, essentially. You know, I know people that are doing all kinds of little research projects on ants that are 6 years old, you know, so I think it's all about passion. And, you know, if you set your mind to do something and you're really excited about doing it, then you'll find a way to do it no matter what age you are.
All right, awesome question. Mrs. Brown's class, they're joining us from West Virginia. They're a grade 4 classroom. And your microphone should be on. There we go.
Hi. Hi, I'm Kirbo.
Hi there.
How many different species
Hi.
of manta are there?
As I said, there's 2 like recognized confirmed species, the giant manta and the reef manta. And then there's a suspected 3rd species of manta that I'm busy studying at the moment that I'd like to describe this year that lives in the Atlantic. And then strangely, you know, there's something called a mobile ray, which people always used to talk of as a mini manta. And now it looks like that these little mobile rays are mini mantas, and the mantas are all going to become one group. So there's actually going to be, you know, I don't know, sort of a dozen species or so of these rays in this one group. So it's a really interesting, it's kind of a loaded question, but at the moment there's 2 like recognized species of mantas and then one that probably is a new species and that we'll hopefully describe this year.
So Andrea, I believe you were the discoverer of that 2nd species, and that was a pretty big deal because it was something so large. You don't usually find a new species that's that large.
I know, and that's the really crazy thing. That's one of the reasons why I always say to like shoot for the stars and never, you know, never doubt yourself, is that, you know, really didn't believe that there was a 2nd species of manta because, you know, they're so large and they figured that people would have noticed if there was 2 different species of manta swimming around in the ocean. So it was kind of a big deal when we described the 2nd species, and I thought it was even funnier when we now believe we have a 3rd species, because that means that all along there would have been 3 different types swimming around in the ocean when everyone always thought there was one. So it just shows you that, you know, even in 2017, there's things left to be discovered. Even some of the biggest animals, we just described a new species of whale, not me, but science has described a new species of whale just, you know, not that long ago. So, you know, there are some really large animals swimming around in the ocean that we know nothing about. So there's still a lot to discover, and there's a lot of science left to do.
That is an absolutely excellent point. There's still so much left for students to get into science and to do and to research. And so definitely don't think there's nothing left for us to find. Before we jump to one more question from Mrs. Brown's class, Andrea, one classroom was wondering where you are right now and if you could pan around with your computer, or is it stuck in one spot?
No, it's not at all. I'm sitting in beautiful South Africa on a rock, on a cliff. So I live in Africa. Normally I live in Mozambique, but at the moment I'm down in South Africa on my way to my field site. I was in Asia doing work in Indonesia and Thailand and Raja Ampat, and I'm now on my way home, and I'm making my way to my house, but it actually takes me about 21 hours. In South Africa, it takes me about 21 hours to drive to my home in Mozambique. So I'm on my way, and I kind of just stopped here, sitting on a rock on the top of a mountain to have a chat with you guys today.
Well, we're incredibly grateful. That view is beautiful. It's definitely better than the library wall I'm looking at right now, so a little bit jealous. But let's jump to Mrs. Brown's class and give them a second question.
I'm Sutton. How aggressive are the manta rays?
Oh, great question. Not at all. So manta rays are just the nicest animals in the world. As I mentioned, they don't really have teeth or a spine, so they can't really hurt you even if they, you know, wanted to. But they don't want to. As you saw in some of those video clips, you know, they're very, very gentle. They're slow moving. And when they come to investigate you, they're very careful as they move around you. I've rarely ever even had a manta ray touch me even in the slightest. You know, they have very spatially aware. And as they come to investigate you, they get very close, but in a very gentle way. So there's just never anything to fear from them. Just the most incredibly, you know, graceful and calm and, you know, delightful animals that you could hope to encounter underwater.
All right, great question. And you know, you surprised me one time when, as a diver myself, you always hear that the bubbles scare animals away, and you really surprised me when you told me that the mantis seem to like the sound it brings them in, and they love the bubbles on their skin. And yeah, I thought that was incredible, pretty cool.
Yeah, they love it. So one of the techniques that we have as divers is to go underwater, and sometimes you just take your regulator out of your mouth and blow a lot of air to make a lot of noise. And when you do, like, the mantis hear it, and then they come and they love to swim above your head. And it's almost like they get tickled by the bellies as it hits their stomach, or by the bubbles as it hits their bellies. And it's just really fun to watch, to see how much they love those bubbles.
All right, and our final class is joining us from Austin, Texas. They're a grade 8 classroom. Let me turn your microphone on for a question or two.
Hello.
All right, hi.
Okay,
So my question is, when do the manta rays know when to pop their eyeball out? Like,
or eyeball in?
No, like out after it's in. How do they know if the
Oh, yeah, okay. Cool question. So basically they do that when you get a little bit too close. So essentially, because eyesight is so important to them, you know, because they're very spatially aware animals, eyesight is so important, they'll do anything to protect those eyes. So if you get a little bit too close, and what I mean by that is maybe about 8 inches away or so, they'll like suck it into their head, and then they kind of just wait until they have a lot of other senses. So they have a lateral line, and they have all of these other sensory pores. They can actually detect electromagnetic impulses like sharks can. So they can, even though they're not looking at you, they can still feel that you're there. And when they feel that you get a little bit farther away, they'll pop it back out again. But you know, they do pull it in for a little bit of time. Just, you know, it's kind of like you. If something gets too close to your face, you blink, but instead of blinking, they suck their eye in. It's kind of a cool party trick. I wish I could do it.
All right, and one more question from our group in Austin.
How much would you say the price would be to put a manta ray on exhibit or tour?
How much would the prize be? I don't know if there would be a prize. I know it's very expensive. I know that there are a couple on display in various parts of the world. So not that far aquarium. They have I think they have 4 different manta rays swimming around in captivity there. I'm not a huge fan, obviously, of putting animals in captivity. I know that, I mean, for me, I always prefer animals in the wild. But I know that they are a big attraction for people who don't dive or who have never seen the ocean or have never gone underwater. It's a pretty big deal to be able to see a manta. So I know that aquariums have spent upwards of $1 million to get manta rays into their exhibits in order to increase traffic into the aquarium. So they're worth a lot of money, and it costs a lot of money to get them put into those exhibits. But honestly, you'll definitely have a better encounter if you go out and swim with one in the wild.
All right, I agree with that one 100%. Well, classrooms, thank you so much. Those were some awesome questions. Andrea,
Yeah,
of
very
course,
cool.
thank you so much for taking the time on your journey
You're
back.
welcome.
We have more Sharks4Kids hangouts coming up throughout the week. In fact, our next one will be at 1 o'clock Eastern with Lindsay Graff, and she'll be talking about some of her bull shark work in Fiji. But until then, again, Andrea, an absolute pleasure. Classrooms are joined. Thank you.
Definitely. Have a great week. Sounds like an exciting lineup, Joe. Very cool. Thanks, guys, for having me.
It's going to be fun. Let me turn the mics on, let the classroom say goodbye, and thank you.
Nicely say goodbye.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in
Thank you, Joe.
to Kids, and we're logging off.